Hey there, Eli again, coming at you from OSA Coventry, here to cover a topic that's a little bit different than my usual, but today I kind of wanted to talk about being a conscientious fish keeper. So one of the most difficult things, especially for a beginner hobbyist, is making sure that you start off on the right foot, especially when it comes to picking out new fish for your aquarium. I know everybody gets really excited. There's so many cool fish, so many different things to keep. It's really hard to be very patient and be kind of scrutinous when it comes to choosing fish for your aquarium. So today I'm going to talk about a little bit more specifically choosing saltwater fish. However, a lot of these rules can still apply to the freshwater setting too. So let's get into that a little bit. When it comes to choosing fish, patience is key. A lot of times people will set up a tank and within a week or two's time are ready to go, want to throw fish in the tank, and generally you might not be even ready at this stage. It's definitely important to make sure that your tank is well cycled, well seated, ready to go and operational before you do start choosing fish. And then making sure, as if it is a brand new aquarium, that you start with some hardier aquarium fish to start with, just to make sure that your cycle was finished. Whether these be something like clownfish or damselfish, it's really important to make sure that before you jump the gun and load this tank full of fish, that it is safe to do so. So that's definitely important, is start out slow, start out cautious, and with some hardy fish just to make sure that everything is going well. Now, when it comes to choosing individual fish, definitely standing back from the tank, watching this tank for a while helps out to make sure that you're choosing a healthy specimen. A lot of things to look for. Number one would be coloration of the fish. Does this fish look how you would expect a healthy version of this fish to look? Say we're looking at a fox-faced rabbit fish. If this fish is not bright yellow with a black and white face, that would prove that maybe something is stressing him out. That is a good example of a fish that can very drastically change in coloration. If they are not happy, sometimes they turn kind of brown with a mottled appearance. But if this fish does not look bright yellow in the tank, there's probably a reason for that. In addition, looking at fin condition, whether these fins are in good shape or if they're tattered or torn up, whether this fish is displaying its fins nice and well, or if the fish is keeping the fins tightly clamped into its body, is a very good sign to look for. Generally, a healthy fish will have its fins nice and well displayed, but if these fins are clamped into the body, that generally shows that something is wrong with the fish. Maybe he's just super stressed, or maybe he's got some sort of underlying infection or condition that is kind of affecting his mood and the way he displays himself. Now, here at the OSA, we do our best to make sure that we are starting you guys off on the right foot. Please, if you ever have questions about any fish, feel free to ask them. In addition, a vast majority of these fish, especially the saltwater fish, are actually hand-picked for us. So we have the advantage of having a lot of these fish come in the best condition that we can honestly get. That being said, we always want to make sure you guys start off on the right foot. Nobody here at the OSA is going to try to push any sort of a sale on you just to get something out of the door. If we don't think a fish is doing well, in all honesty, we don't usually sell them, but it is very important to take that upon yourself to make sure that the fish is looking in great condition as well. Asking whether a fish is feeding well or asking what a fish is eating is another important way to make sure that you are capable of taking care of the fish when you get home. A lot of saltwater fish in specific are pretty picky about what they eat. Things like mandarin gobies, dragonets, leopard wrasses, and some of these other finicky fish, some angelfish, really are picky about diet. And a lot of the times when these fish come in, especially considering most of them are wild caught, it can be difficult to transition them to readily available feeds for an aquarium. So some fish are not going to eat frozen food right off the bat. Copper band butterfly is another great example. And we do our best, especially with these finicky pickers, to make sure that we know what fish is eating and whether the fish is eating well. But asking that question, asking whether a finicky eater is eating in the shop, is an important way to make sure that you do okay with this fish down the road. Also worth note, compatibility. A lot of fish, especially saltwater fish, can be pretty territorial when it comes down to tanks, especially when we're talking about smaller tanks, let's say 75 gallons or smaller. Some of these fish can be a little extra territorial because they feel like they are a little more crammed for space in a tank of this size. So being careful about compatibility, what fish goes with which other fish, and max sizes is also very important to make sure that these fish do well for you, especially when we're looking at very active swimmers, especially like Acanthoris tangs, like powder browns, powder blues, making sure that you have the most space available for this fish, nothing smaller than a 5 or 6 foot tank and a lot of open swimming space. Make sure that this fish feels more comfy in its new home and that it's going to be a little less territorial with its tank mates. In addition, making sure that you have a suitable house for these fish. Overall, make sure that they're a little less stressed, helps to ward off any sort of illness in case that they are susceptible to it. So even if a fish may be carrying something like ick or a bacterial infection when you purchase it, making sure that it's comfy and happy in its new aquarium, sometimes you'll never even notice that this fish was carrying an illness at all, and its immune system can take care of that on its own. We here at OSA do medicate everything as it first arrives. Believe it or not, both of these saltwater systems are always kept at a therapeutic level of copper, and this helps to make sure that we don't get ick or marine velvet flare-ups in these fish systems here. That being said, we do also medicate the food, especially for the first week after receiving a new shipment of saltwater fish. We generally add Canaplex and Metroplex to the food, which is a good way for us to kind of make sure that these fish are not getting internal bacterial infections, and it helps to mitigate any risk of ick or some of these other dreaded diseases in the saltwater aquarium setting. That being said, if these fish are brand new to the shop here, we are being proactive to make sure that they don't develop illness in the shop. However, if this fish doesn't sit long enough in our systems, that does not mean that this is a fully quarantined fish by any means. So it is important, if you desire to quarantine these fish, that you do take that task upon yourself to make sure that these fish are not going to spread illness to your aquarium. In addition, just making sure that your display tank has good filtration, very clean water, and perhaps a UV sterilizer is another really important way to make sure after you introduce a fish from any shop that you don't risk getting the rest of your tank sick, as this is something that you always risk with these saltwater fish, with many of them being wild caught, and that is just the unfortunate truth. In addition to that, generally we keep a decent track. Most of our staff will know about how long these fish have been in our systems. So if that is something that you're curious about, feel free to ask that when you're looking at our fish here. Generally, if these fish have sat here for about 2 weeks or so, you can assume that they've gotten almost a full treatment of copper and that they've had enough meds introduced through the medicated food that these fish are going to do pretty well for you. 90% or so chance that these are going to be clean fish when you pick them up at that rate. However, we can never boast that these fish are fully quarantined, just because of the nature of always having fish move in and out of these systems. But we do our best to make sure that we are selling clean, healthy, and happy fish to you guys, because we want to make sure everybody is succeeding in the long run with their aquariums. Thank you all for listening to this topic. I understand it's kind of a tricky one, and it's something that definitely most aquarists take a really long time to master, just being very patient and being cautious and being conscientious with what they pick and how they introduce fish to their aquariums. However, we are always here to help you guys out. We want to make sure everybody succeeds with their tanks. So feel free next time you're in the shop, ask away, ask questions about the fish you're looking at, and we will do our best to steer you in the right direction. As always, thank you guys for watching. Let us know in the comment section below if you have questions, maybe suggestions for future videos, and keep on reefing.